In this module, we are going to commence with market failure and functions of government externalities. Market failure is said to occur when the resources are not allocated efficiently. There are many reasons for market failure like presence of externalities, imperfect markets, incomplete markets, public goods, etc. All such situations lead to inefficient allocation of resources and calls for the need to correct the allocation. The government plays an important regulatory and prohibitive role in such situations. Externalities occur when the actions of one individual affect another person's well-being and the relevant cost and benefits are not reflected in the market prices. In case of negative externality, a producer or consumer do not bear the actual cost and imposes cost on those who are not directly involved in exchange. A positive externality, on the other hand, confers benefits on those who do not pay for it. It is desirable for the society to discourage the negative externalities and encourage the positive externalities. For this, government's role is very crucial. Let us analyze in detail the market failure arising due to the presence of externalities and the function of government in eliminating it. After studying this module, you shall be able to know the market failure and role of government in averting it, learn about the market failure arising from externalities, identify the examples of positive and negative externalities, evaluate the policy measures government takes to correct the positive and negative externalities, analyze the implications of Coase theorem for eliminating externalities. Let us begin by understanding the concept of market failure. Market failure occurs when there is an inefficient allocation of resources in a free market. In more general terms, these are those situations where market forces do not serve the perceived public interest. Market failure can occur due to a variety of reasons, such as monopoly, where higher prices and less output is being sold, negative externalities, where there is overconsumption, positive externalities, where there is underconsumption, public goods, where usually not provided in a free market, etc. These reasons can be broadly grouped as first, suboptimal market structures, and second, the lack of internalization of cost or benefits in prices. This makes for the role of government to allocate resources in accordance with social desirability. Government is expected to perform various regulatory, allocative and stabilizing functions in pursuit of achieving macroeconomic goals. In the event of market failure, government comes into the focus and influences the market outcome through its regulatory policy framework and actions. This results in elimination of market failure and efficient allocation is achieved in the market and economy. Now, we will discuss negative externalities and market failure. Externalities are common in virtually every area of economic activity. They are defined as third-party or spillover effects arising from the production and or consumption of goods and services for which no appropriate compensation is paid. Externalities occur when one person's action affects another person's well-being and the relevant cost and benefits are not reflected in the market prices. Externalities can cause market failure because the price mechanism does not take into account the full social cost and social benefits of production and consumption. A negative externality occurs when the action of one party imposes cost on another party. In case of negative externality, a divergence between private and social cost of consumption or production is created. Social cost includes all the cost of production of the output of a particular good or service. This includes all third party or external cost arising out of the act of consumption and or production. Social cost therefore is equals to private cost plus externality. An example of negative production externality is pollution by a firm in the course of its production, which causes nuisance and harm to others as well as to the environment. The market failure occurs in this case because with production externality, marginal social cost is greater than the private marginal cost. The negative externalities impose higher social cost on other firms, consumers and environment, for example, cleanup cost, health cost, environmental degradation, etc.
Let us see the effects of negative externality. The effects of negative externality created by this producer have been shown in the given figure. In figure, it can be clearly seen that the marginal social cost of production exceeds the private cost faced by the producer. This is due to the inclusion of full cost including external cost caused by pollution of the environment into the private cost. Assuming that the producer is interested in maximizing profits, he will only take into account the private cost and the private benefits arising from their supply of the product. In figure, this corresponds to point A, where profit maximizing level of output is at QP and price charged is PP. However, the socially efficient level of production would consider the external cost too. The social optimum output level is lower at QS. This leads to the private optimum output being greater than the social optimum level of production. The producer creating the externality does not take the effects of externalities into his cost calculations because producers are only concerned with their own self-interest. In figure, the private optimum output is where private marginal benefit, which corresponds to the points on demand curve, equals the private marginal cost, giving an output of QP. For society as a whole, the social optimum is where social marginal benefit is equal to social marginal cost at output QS. The failure to take into account the negative externality effects is an example of market failure. This leads to the good or service being overproduced relative to the social optimum. It must be noted that price is higher at the socially optimum level of output because this considers the actual cost of production, which raises price.
Apart from production, the negative externality can also occur due to overconsumption of some goods and services, that is, beyond their socially optimum level. The example of negative consumption externality which the consumers can create include pollution from cars and motorbike, litter on streets and in the public places, noise pollution from using loud music and ghetto blasters in streets and public places, negative externalities created by smoking and alcohol abuse, vandalism of public property, negative externalities arising from crime. In all such situations, the marginal social benefit of consumption is less than the marginal private benefit of consumption, that is, SMB is less than PMB. This leads to the good or service being overconsumed relative to the social optimum. Moving on to the positive externalities and market failure, not all actions impose cost, rather, there are some actions in the economy by one individual which confers benefits to other individuals who do not pay for the benefits which they enjoy. So, positive externality occurs when the actions of one party benefits another party. Positive externalities exist when the marginal social benefit of production or consumption exceeds the marginal private benefit, that is, production or consumption generate external benefits that may go under value by the market. There are many examples from day-to-day economic activities that generate positive externalities. Imparting education leads to the creation of well-educated labor force with increased efficiency, which can produce other important social benefits like lower unemployment, lesser crimes, reduction in social unrest, etc. Provision of improved healthcare services reduces absenteeism and creates a better quality of life and higher living standards. An attractive garden maintained by an individual in front of his house will also confer benefits in terms of pleasure watching beautiful flowers and plants to the passerbys and those who are living in the area. Arts and sporting participation and enjoyment derived from historic building. When a firm provides industrial training to its employees, this can reduce the cost faced by other firms and has important effects on the labor productivity. A faster growth of productivity allows more output to be produced from a given amount of resources and help to improve the living standards throughout the economy, thereby shifting the production possibility frontier outward. Research into new technologies can be disseminated for use by other producers, and these technologies spillover effects can actually help the other producers to reduce the cost of production, which can be passed on to the consumers through lower prices. Next, market failure occurs in case of positive externalities on account of their underproduction and underconsumption. When substantial positive externalities exist, the good or the service may be underconsumed or underprovided, since the free market may fail to take into account their effects. This is because the marginal social benefits of consuming the good are higher than the private marginal benefits. Consider the example of healthcare. Good quality healthcare brings positive spillover effects both for the recipient of the care but also for their families and associates. A healthy individual and family creates a healthy workforce which is more productive, and the scale of absenteeism from work due to sickness and illness would also be lesser.
This can be illustrated using the given figure. In given figure, private demand curve shows the private benefit to an individual of availing quality health care services, while social demand shows the social marginal benefit. The vertical distance between these two curves represents the external marginal benefit or positive externality. Supply curve shows the marginal cost of providing health care. As it can be seen from the given figure, if the recipient of quality health care takes into account only his own private benefits from getting health care, the market will end up at price PP and quantity QP. But the social efficient price and output are PS and QS respectively. This is because at point B, corresponding to socially optimum output and prices, marginal social benefit is equal to marginal social cost. Production and consumption should be increased as long as the marginal social benefit exceeds marginal social cost. But here, as inefficient output QP is produced, there is a case of market failure due to allocative inefficiency. Society as a whole would be better off if more have been consumed.
Just like negative externalities, positive externalities may also be involved with the act of production as well as consumption. Positive externalities arising from technological spillovers is an example of a positive externality in production in the form of a technology spillover. The use of new technology will bring down the cost to other producers. Social cost in this case will be below private cost and output of the product, that is a new robot or piece of software. Thus, these should be encouraged to higher levels. Now, we will discuss government policy to correct the negative externality. When externalities are present, the individual pursuit of self-interest rarely results in maximum social welfare, and the result is an outcome that is inefficient. This implies that a rearrangement could make at least some people better off without harming others in the process. Thus, there is an economic rationale for some form of government intervention in markets where externalities are prevalent. The need for government interventions arises because without government intervention, the good or service which is producing negative externality will be underpriced as well as underproduced, and the negative externalities will not be taken into account. Similarly, in case of negative externality in consumption, there will always be overconsumption compared to what is considered socially optimum. One such example of negative externality in consumption is smoking. There are potential negative effects of people consuming cigarettes or other consumers. The disutility or dissatisfaction created leads to a reduction in the overall social benefit of consumption. If the cigarette consumer only considers their own private cost and benefits, then there will be an overconsumption of the product. In case of negative externality in consumption, the optimum consumption is always less than the private consumption level. In this example, the socially efficient level of cigarette consumption will be lower than the level being consumed by private individuals who are not considering the negative impact of their consumption on others. In all such cases, there arises a need for government to formulate appropriate policies or strategies that can lead to those levels of production and consumption where marginal social benefit is equals to the marginal social cost, thereby resulting in allocative efficiency. There are many ways in which the government can eliminate negative externalities. First, internalizing the externalities. Negative externality occurs because the private entities do not pay the full cost of their actions and therefore overproduce. One way to eliminate externality is to internalize the externalities so that producers have to pay the external cost also, which will then encourage the producers to produce at the socially optimum output. The internalization can be through imposition of certain taxes on production and consumption, like A. Pollution tax, which is a classic way to adjust for externalities, is a tax on those who create negative externalities. Apart from pollution, there can be other adverse effects of a production or consumption activity which can be corrected by imposes taxes on undesirable production or consumption. However, this taxation approach is accompanied by some problems like reduced output and higher prices, which might reduce consumer surplus. Consumer surplus will also be affected when the demand for the product is inelastic and producer pass on the tax to the consumers in the form of higher prices. This may also have regressive effect on low income households when taxes are imposed on demerit goods. B. Along with emission and affluent taxes, specific purpose levies are announced by the government which are levied for a specific purpose. For example, introduction of the climate change levy. Second, regulation through policies. The government can also eliminate negative externalities by issuing policy regulations which seek to guide the actions of producers and consumers in the socially desirable manner. For example, by setting minimum standards for health and safety at workplace, stricter penalties for firms and consumers who break regulations, banning cigarette smoking in public places, and advertisements of these dangerous products and making workplaces no smoking environments. All such policies aim at regulating the behavior of all those entities which are producing negative externalities. Third, enforcement of property rights. Externalities arise because property rights are not fully allocated. For example, the atmosphere or environment or oceans are nobody's private property. Extension and enforcement of property rights to private individuals and firms is an alternative to the government regulation. For example, if property rights are assigned to a fishery to enjoy clean river, then a factory upstream polluting the river could not ignore the cost of polluting the river, but it will have to trade with the fishery if it can allow the factory to pollute river to a certain extent and for which it compensates the fishery. It therefore gives the fishery the right to charge factories or companies who pollute the rivers. Extending the property rights is one of the methods of internalizing the externality. The advantages of extending the property rights are many, including lesser need for government intervention as the owner of the property will better be able to handle their property themselves, facilitation of direct transfer of resources from the polluters to those who suffer, achieving the efficient outcomes, etc. In spite of these advantages, a number of disadvantages also come in the way to extending the property rights, like the inability of government to extend the property rights. This is because it may be difficult to link between the pollution and the problem. Another problem arises in assessing the value of the property for which rights need to be extended and then the compensation charged thereafter. Fourth, marketable pollution permits. These are something which are extensively used in the global world in order to minimize the global pollution. Different countries are granted permits for a certain level of use of harmful greenhouse gases so that the overall global effect does not exceed the permissible levels. These permits are tradable and the countries can trade among themselves if one underproduces and the other overproduces. This is based on the belief amongst economists that the free market mechanism offers a better solution. Pollution permits are a combination of command and control or regulations and market-based approaches to the task of limiting pollution emissions. Next, we will understand government policy to correct the positive externality. It is generally seen that consumption and production activities which generate positive externalities are generally underproduced or underconsumed. This means the society as a whole can benefit if there is more production and consumption. For example, the provision and consumption of healthcare services leads to an increase in the social benefits and a reduction in the social cost. So, in the society, people should be encouraged to increase their consumption of healthcare services. Similarly, through education, the wider community can benefit in terms of skills acquired and knowledge learnt, which can further raise society's productivity. Here, the role of government is very important in subsidizing the consumption of such merit goods, in promoting and advertising such products, etc. There are following options of government intervention to encourage the production and consumption of positive externalities. First, increasing supply. The supply goods and services that generate external benefits can be raised if the government provides grants and subsidies to the producers, which will reduce cost of production and encourage more supply. This is a common remedy to encourage the supply of merit goods such as healthcare, education and social housing. Such merit goods can be funded out of the tax revenues of the central and the local governments. Public goods such as roads, bridges and airports also generate significant positive externalities, and these can also be built and maintained out of the tax revenue. Second, increasing demand. Demand for goods is inversely related to the prices. Government can encourage the consumption of those goods and services which generate positive externalities by reducing the price paid by the consumers. For example, subsidizing the educational loans of university students will encourage more young people to go to university, which will generate a positive externality for the future generations. The government can also provide certain merit goods like hospital treatment for contagious diseases completely free to protect others in the society. Government can also provide free information to consumers through promotional advertisements to compensate for the information failure that discourages consumption. These can be in the form of public information broadcast such as AIDS awareness program, which can reduce ignorance and encourage the use of safety measures. Command and control techniques. An additional option is to compel individuals to consume the good or service that generates the external benefit by issuing directions for the same. For example, if suspected of having a contagious disease, an individual may be forced into the hospital to receive the treatment even against their will. Finally, we will discuss the Coase theorem and externalities. Ronald Coase suggested a solution to a well-known problem of market externalities. He argues that if the property rights are well defined, there are a small number of individuals and the cost of bargaining are not significant, then these bargains can bring about an efficient outcome and eliminate the externalities from the market without any government intervention. This is widely known as Coase theorem. The government in such a situation should restrict its role to facilitating bargaining among the affected groups or individuals and to enforcing any contracts that result. This individual bargaining among people would result in efficient outcome in the market. This has implication for both positive and negative spillover effects. The main implication of the theorem is that all that is needed to achieve efficient allocation is a common law or statutory rule which assigns right over the externality to one party or another. After assignment of rights, the market mechanism will function at its own in the same way as it does for the ordinary goods and services over which rights are clearly defined. Let us now summarize what we have learnt in this module. Externalities occur when the relevant cost or benefit is not accounted for in the price of goods or services. Negative externalities occur when the producer or consumer does not account for all the cost. A positive externality exists when a producer or consumer cannot appropriate all the benefits of the activities it has undertaken to himself. Individuals who consider only their own private cost and private benefits too much of any activity that generates negative externalities and too little of one that generates positive externalities. With both positive and negative externalities, market outcomes need some kind of regulation to be more efficient, which comes in the form of government regulation. Government encourages positive externalities and discourages negative externalities. Coase theorem offers solutions to externality problem in the form of bargaining among the affected parties, provided that property rights are clearly defined and transaction costs are zero.